Reverend clergy, brothers and sisters in Christ, I'm Alex Machaskee, and it is a pleasure for me to welcome you to this first public forum about the effort to unify the 12 Orthodox jurisdictions in the United States. This public forum, which is intended to be replicated in other cities, has been created under the auspices of the Assembly of Canonical Orthodox Bishops of North and Central America and the Greater Cleveland Council of Orthodox Clergy. As a communications consultant and member of the Secretariat of the Assembly of Canonical Orthodox Bishops, I wish to express my gratitude to Father Michael Butler, President of the Greater Cleveland Council of Orthodox Clergy, for his cooperation, and to Father Alexander Garklaus for opening his beautiful Holy Trinity Orthodox Church for Vespers and this evening's program. I hope many of you will return next week when Holy Trinity will observe its 50th anniversary. I want to especially thank Andy Cartelis, the chairman of this event, and Sante Loises, the ACOB Communications Officer, for their steadfast work for this first-of-a-kind program to inform the laity about the work and progress of the Assembly of Bishops. The heads of all the Orthodox churches from around the world met in June of 2009 in Chambéry, Switzerland, to organize and to begin the planning for the unity of the Orthodox Church. With us today is Protodeacon Peter Danilchick, a member of the Secretariat of the Assembly of Bishops, who will discuss the Assembly's history, goals, and the progress of the recent fourth annual meeting in Chicago. Now, as an aside, 18 years ago, I gave the commencement address at St. Vladimir's Orthodox Theological Seminary in New York, where I am currently executive chair of the board and looking forward to celebrating our 75th anniversary with a gala dinner November 7th. In that address, I said I had hoped for a reduction in the tensions between the Patriarchate in Moscow and the Patriarchate in Istanbul and the gravitational pull between both and the United States. I think I could probably make the same speech today, but alas, there is hope. And Protodeacon Peter will share the hope we have as we all try to find our own unity with God as a predicate for unity among the Orthodox jurisdictions. Protodeacon Peter was ordained to the Holy Diaconate by Archbishop Dimitri of the OCA in 1975. He is presently attached to the protection of the Mother of God Orthodox Church in Falls Church, Virginia, the Romanian episcopate of the OCA. Almost half of his 37 years of diaconal service was spent overseas in Japan, Singapore, Australia, Germany, and Hong Kong. In the U.S., Protodeacon Peter served parishes of OCA and the Antiochian Archdiocese in Texas and New Jersey. The great majority of his international assignments were with parishes and missions of the Ecumenical Patriarchate. He is currently a member of the Board of Trustees of St. Vladimir's Seminary in Crestwood, New York, and serves on the executive and audit committees and is the chairman of the Technology Committee. Protodeacon Peter led St. Vlad's first and second strategic planning efforts between 1989 and 2003. He is a member of the OCA Sexual Misconduct Policy Advisory Committee and has served on the OCA Metropolitan Council. Protodeacon Peter holds bachelor's and master's degrees in electrical engineering from the Cooper Union for the Advancement of Science and Art and Syracuse University, respectively, and has attended international management programs in Lausanne, Switzerland. As a member of several Blue Ribbon electrical and mathematical honorary societies, Protodeacon Peter has 33 years of operations, planning, and general management experience with ExxonMobil Corporation, where he retired in 2003 as manager, global planning support, refining and supply in Fairfax, Virginia, with responsibility for coordinating strategic and investment planning and stewardship for ExxonMobil's worldwide refining and supply business. As a member of the Secretariat of the Assembly of Bishops, he serves as senior consultant to the Assembly Coordinator for Committees and as a facilitator liaison for the Committee for Canonical Regional Planning, Financial Affairs, and Theological Education. Protodeacon Peter and his lovely wife Tanya, who is with us tonight, reside in Oakton, Virginia, and have 3 children and 8 grandchildren. Please welcome Protodeacon Peter.
Thank you very much, Alex, for that introduction, and especially also the overview of the work of the Assembly of Bishops. I'd like to echo his express thanks to Father Alex Garcloves and all of the parishioners of Holy Trinity Orthodox Church here in Parma, Ohio, and also especially for the presence here of His Eminence Metropolitan Savas and His Grace Bishop Peter. They are the key persons here, not me certainly, because the Assembly of Bishops is made up of the bishops. The bishops are the ones who are doing the work. They have their assistants, they have their servants, and their helpers, but they are the ones that are doing the work. So I wish to express my inestimable gratitude to the both of you. I'd like to start with a picture. I like to think of this picture that's up on the screen as not only a description of what today's reality is for the Assembly of Bishops, but also a possible future reality, almost an icon, a vision of the future. And it's really a wonderful picture. It was taken about a month ago in Chicago, Illinois, at the Cathedral of the Holy Virgin Protection, one of Bishop Peter's cathedra in Chicago, Illinois, at the 4th Annual Assembly of Canonical Orthodox Bishops meetings there. And it was the first session, and it was held in that cathedral. And you can see essentially 40 to 45 bishops around that table discussing the problems that are affecting our church and the way forward to the future. And perhaps someday we will see the same bishops, hopefully, and or some of their successors in a fully united Orthodox Church in this land. The title of this particular presentation that I'm going to give to you this evening is called The Path to Orthodox Unity. And particularly here in Cleveland, I believe that you are all blessed with a real abundance of Orthodox churches. You have, I believe, 29 Orthodox parishes and 3 Orthodox monasteries in the greater Cleveland area. And I put several of the fronts of those churches here just to express kind of in a semi-halo around a scriptural quotation from our Lord Jesus Christ from the high priestly prayer to his Father in John chapter 17, which we hear especially the evening of Holy Thursday for Matins of Great and Holy Friday during Holy Week. And we have Romanian church, Antiochian church, OCA, we have the Ukrainian, we have the Serbian, we have the Greek, and we have the Russian church. All surrounding the desire of Jesus and his prayer to his Father that we may all be one. Now in John chapter 17, there are 4 places in there that Jesus prays to the Father that they, his disciples, and the ones who follow in their footsteps, namely us, may become one. But the last one of those 4 is even more powerful than the ones preceding them. And it says that they may become perfectly one, that the world may know that you have sent me, O Father, and has loved them as you have loved me. And the word perfectly here is from the same Greek root, teleo, as the word that is used, that is spoken by Jesus, his last words on the cross, it is finished, or it is completed, or it is accomplished, tetelestai. This is teleo. And the whole idea of being perfectly one here is not just one in faith, not just one in sacraments, not just one in friendship, but one in complete oneness, complete mind and complete judgment, in oneness of mind and judgment, as St. Paul said in his first epistle to the Corinthians. And there is a missionary imperative here, and it's so that the world may know that you, O Father, Jesus says, have sent me and has loved me. So in that expression of our unity, we will be able to satisfy that great commission of Christ, that go forth, baptize all nations. And this is why, fundamentally, this idea of unity in the church, and perfect unity, is so important. It doesn't come from us. It doesn't even come from the bishops. It doesn't come from the clergy. It doesn't come from parish councils. It comes from the word and the prayer of Jesus Christ himself to his Father. Now, the title of the presentation is The Path to Orthodox Unity, and I can announce that it is under construction. You know that when you see a highway under construction, you see a sign there that talks about the governor has approved this expenditure of millions of dollars. And there's a date, though. We don't have a date. We hope it's going to be as soon as possible, but we are going to talk a little bit about that later on. But we can announce the road has been dug up and it's under construction. Now, the topics of tonight's forum are, first of all, who started us down this path to Orthodox unity? Who's in charge of the construction? Who are the architects and the workers? And what are the issues and the obstacles? Because as you know, any kind of a road that you build sometimes has to go through mountains. It has to ford rivers. It has to go through difficult terrain. I was just seeing a video on the building of the Panama Canal. I was amazed at the amount of intense disease and hardship that had to be undertaken by those workers just to build a big ditch. And for us in this great effort of Orthodox unity, should expect that we will have to ford rivers and climb mountains. I'll finish off with some personal observations. Everything before that will be facts. The other one will be some of my own particular comments. But then, most importantly, we'll segue into a question and answer session with the bishops. Now, I don't know whether it has been passed out already or it will be passed out, but there are some 3x5, I think they're 3x5 index cards, which I would encourage you, as you hear the words of the presentation, if you have some questions or have some comments, just jot them down on a piece of paper so that you'll remember that when it comes time to the Q&A session. And as well, if you feel maybe uncomfortable about standing up and asking your question, you can always pass it to someone. We'll collect them, and then we'll just read them anonymously. But we really do hear, although I like to talk a lot, we really want to hear what our hierarchs have to say. Who started us down this path? It was actually started overseas by the heads of the Orthodox churches, the ancient patriarchates and the ancient autocephalous churches, who were called together by the ecumenical patriarch Bartholomew in October 2008 in a call to unity. And it said a lot of things, but basically it called for the swift healing of every canonical anomaly that has arisen from historical circumstances and pastoral requirements around the world, outside of the territories of the ancient autocephalous churches and the patriarchates. Now, there are a couple of things that I just want to call to your attention on this one here. First and foremost is the whole idea of the canonical anomaly, and that's basically the overlapping jurisdictions of bishops, many bishops in the same place, and so on, to try to achieve that one bishop in one place, which is the canonical standard of the Orthodox Church. But the word swift healing really refers to binding a healing of a wound, basically binding up something that has been broken, that has been distorted, that isn't complete, to make it complete. So there's a very personal interaction here that's going on. This is not a negotiation among big businesses in order to make money. This is the healing of the ties of brotherhood between the various churches. And it also called for the swift healing. And this, I think, is very, very important. It's that it's not something like, not in my lifetime or 20 or 30 or 40 years from now. It talks about swift. Now, different people think different things about swift, but here I think we need to take the primates at their word. Approximately 9 months later, June 2009, there was actually a physical structure that was put together for working together. Fourth Preconciliar Pan-Orthodox Conference in Chambozy, Geneva, at the Ecumenical Patriarch Center there in Switzerland. And it's a preconciliar because what the objective is here is to prepare for a great and holy council of all the Orthodox churches together to review and to discuss and to decide upon various important issues, which one of them obviously is the multiple jurisdictions. So what they did was they established 12 regional assemblies of bishops, one of which is North and Central America, South America, Asia, Oceania, New Zealand, France, Italy, Germany, and so on. And they actually charged these assemblies with certain tasks. And one of them clearly is manifestation of unity, that we need to actually go out and physically become more active in terms of manifesting that unity, not just among bishops, but among all of the churches, all of the people, the clergy and the laity, and so on. Common action, what things we can do together, we should do together. And the last one, very importantly, is the preparation of a plan to organize the Orthodox of the region on a canonical basis. And that's going to be something that was most especially discussed in this the last assembly, assembly number 4 last month, and we'll be discussing some of that. Now, just a very short time after that, the Assembly of Bishops of North and Central America was organized, and their function is to work for unity. There were 4 annual meetings that were held, the first one in New York City, and the following 3 in Chicago, 2010, 2011, 2012, and 2013. And as usual, the first one of those meetings was really an organizational meeting. It assumed the responsibilities of SCOBA, especially the responsibility for oversight of agencies and endorsed organizations like IOCC, Orthodox Christian Network, OCMC, and so on. Those agencies which are running very strongly, we didn't want them to lose any momentum. And also set up an administrative and a committee organization. Administrative was basically the secretariat. I won't talk too much about that tonight, but that's headed by Bishop Basil of the Antiochian Archdiocese in Wichita, and then that is running quite well, I believe. But then the next 2, in September 2012, 2013, focus more intensely on the questions of how do we really run things, canonical affairs, how do we ensure that we have lists of canonical parishes, canonical clergy, how do we inform one another in different churches if there's some issues with some of the clergy with respect to discipline, etc. And the last one really went into very intensive discussions on the assembly vision, what we were really looking for, and the canonical reorganization. So we've gone from the general to the particular, and we've also gone from a more formal structure of discussions to a much more informal one with breakout groups and reports by the bishops individually, and so a much more of an intensive, much more of an intimate sort of working together. Now, talking about the committees are not just there once a year like these general meetings, but they're working year-round. And this is a photograph of a meeting of the committee chairs that was held last year. And I think it was one of the first times that we've probably seen, or at least was related to me, that we had bishops from so many jurisdictions who are actively engaged in a meeting and talking about what they're doing and what help they need and what problems they're encountering, and also, very nicely, what successes they're encountering in order to basically build up and encourage one another. So the meetings, the committees are Canonical Affairs, which again is dealing with issues of the register of canonical clergy and parishes, Canonical Regional Planning, which I'll talk about later, Church and Society, of which Metropolitan Savas is the chair of that, Clergy Matters, again, questions of assignments of clergy, transfer of clergy, etc. Ecumenical Relations, Financial Affairs, Legal Affairs, Liturgy, Military Chaplaincy, Monastic Communities, Pastoral Practice, again, whole issues of marriage, divorce, how do you receive people from other faiths, other denominations, all of those really practical issues, theological education, and lastly, youth. Now, it's not just the bishops who are doing all of this work, although they are the ones who are in charge. They have the authority. They have the responsibility. The buck stops with the hierarchs, as it should in our church. But in all of these committees, the members, the bishop members of the committees, have numerous clergy and laity helping them. And so they're working together. It's kind of a microcosm of the church, kind of a vertical slice from the bottom to the top in terms of ministerial responsibility. Pastoral practice, canonical regional planning, legal affairs. There are something like 17 lawyers who are working pro bono in terms of the legal issues that are impacting putting together basically a unified church. Financial affairs, and just in the picture in that financial affairs, we have 2 priests who are CPAs, we have an investment planning professional, we have a tax attorney assisting Metropolitan Anthony of the Ukrainian church. So there's a lot of expertise. Youth, you'll see there's a lot of people there. That's one of the most active committees. It's chaired by Bishop Thomas of the Antiochian Archdiocese, and I'll talk a little bit more about what some of their plans are. Now, all of these committees, everyone working together, are basically laying a foundation. Again, it's a construction project, laying a foundation for common work. And one of the most critical things in any kind of a project is to make sure that everybody's communicating. And we're not only communicating among the workers, but we're communicating among the supporters, the people who need to know, the people who need to understand what's happening. And again, Alex Machaskee, who kicked off this evening's discussions, is our communications consultant, and Asante Luizos is our communications officer. And we have regular communications via the website, assemblybishops.org. And if you've never gone on it, go on it. It's really great. There's lots of interviews with the bishops. There's reports of all of the committees, etc. Now, talking about a few of the highlights of what the committees do. The Financial Affairs Committee is working towards developing a sound financial base for the Assembly, not only in terms of fundraising, development work, but also things like ensuring that we have audits, ensuring that we have transparent financial practices, developing a whole set of best practices that other jurisdictions may be interested in taking a look at. Creation of a canonical registry. I mentioned that already. That's Metropolitan Methodius' of Boston, his particular committee. Documenting of clergy issues and pastoral practices. There's already been a document that's been put out that's 192 pages on the pastoral practice differences amongst the various jurisdictions, and these things need to seriously be looked at. Review of ecumenical activities and social issues. There's been a number of social issue statements that have been put onto the website. Addressing of legal issues affecting the Assembly, examination of different approaches to youth and monastic communities. And one of the things that we are looking at, or that the Assembly has given the blessing to take a look at, is to, over the next several years, to see whether or not it wouldn't be possible to have really a kind of a mega youth event. Some of you may have recalled, I think it was like in 1970, the Ciola conference that was, I believe, in Pittsburgh, I think. And it occupied an entire stadium with tens of thousands of people, of youth getting together, and to see whether or not something like that would not be very useful to energize our youth, to show what the power of our church is in the life of our youth. And the last item is the development of different approaches organizationally and models to address this canonical anomaly of more than one bishop in one place. Now, that committee that's responsible for that is the Committee for Canonical Regional Planning, and its chair is Archbishop Nicolai of the Romanian Archdiocese, who is the chairman of that. And that committee was explicitly tasked to be the architect of a proposed reorganizational plan. Now, just going back a step, if you're interested in knowing what all these committees do, on the website for each committee there's a tab that's labeled committees, and you can click on that tab. There's a pull-down menu, and you can see exactly what the terms of reference are for each committee, what it's supposed to do, how is it supposed to do it, who is it supposed to do it with. And if you have any questions or or if you want to help particularly, would be really great, you can contact the chair of those committees. Now, there's a little graphic up there in the right-hand corner, and those little lines that are going above the head, I'm not sure whether that's sweat lines or whether it's bright idea lines. We like to think it's a little bit of both. We presented last month several models for an administratively united church in the USA. There was one lead proposal for one bishop in one place and no overlapping diocesan territories. There were other models, and I'll go into that. And the committee requested feedback from the assembled hierarchs via small breakout groups. Each out of the 45 or so bishops that were there, we split them up into about 6 or 7 per table, and you'll see some pictures. They discussed the proposals of the committees, and they came back and they presented it to the plenary session. So again, it's a unique way of being able to get the feedback from the hierarchs. And all of this is to guide the further work of the committee. Now, every construction project needs to have basic principles. It needs to have a philosophy, basic principles for doing that construction. And they're basically twofold in this case. One of the decisions of the Chambézy meeting of representatives of all of those churches was that it is the common will of all the most holy Orthodox churches that the problem of the Orthodox diaspora, and diaspora basically means everyone outside of those historic territories, that problem be resolved as quickly as possible. That it be organized in accordance with Orthodox ecclesiology, the doctrine of the church, and the canonical tradition and practice of the Orthodox Church. That is the existence of only one bishop in the same place. And again, there are a host of canons in the church, starting with First Ecumenical Council in 325 at Nicaea, and being reiterated in numerous other councils for one bishop in one place. That's number one. Number two is, at the same time, we have to recognize, and you go back to that original October 2008 decision, it talked about historical circumstances and pastoral requirements. This situation in the United States didn't just arrive out of nowhere. It came over the past century as immigrant populations came in, as communications were cut off from overseas, as people wanted to have things in their own language, and etc. There were a lot of practical things that happened. So the Chambézy decision expressed concern for what they called the development of common action of all the Orthodox in each region to address the pastoral needs of Orthodox living in the region, including that the diversity of national traditions may secure the unity of orthodoxy in the communion of faith and the bond of love. So we need to be very, very careful everything that we do. So I'd like to talk about first the lead case of the committee, then I'd like to talk about some of the other models, and then I'd like to talk about what the bishop's reaction was to that, and then what is the next step following that. The lead case was to really generate this one bishop in one place. And what the two principles flowing from that were the idea of ecclesiastical provinces and ethnic vicariates. Now that sounds kind of complicated, so let's take it one step at a time. Ethnic provinces would be groupings of dioceses, at least two, in which one would be the archdiocesan see. So you might have, for example, and I'll show you an example later, of Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan might be one of these ecclesiastical provinces, and there might be various dioceses within that province. But there'd be no overlapping of territories for either provinces or dioceses. And I'll show you an illustration that assumes 9 of these provinces, but it could be 7, it could be 15, it could be whatever it is. But we figured here, we need to have a starting point. We need to have something that people can chew on, that they can look at and say, okay, What do we like about this? What don't we like about it? How would this thing work? What are the practical issues? Where are the parishes? What are their problems? Who's growing? Who's declining? Where do we want to put mission parishes? Etc. But unless we have some kind of a structure in place, some kind of a straw man, if you will, we'll never get anywhere because we'll just be talking in the air. Now, the ethnic vicariates would be means of addressing the needs of ethnically oriented parishes. And we've done some surveys, and these are all included in the research that's presented actually on the website of the Assembly of Bishops. It's done by our research coordinator, Alexei Krindach. So we have the issue that a lot of people want to retain their ethnic heritage, their traditions, their languages, and this needs to be respected, obviously. So the ethnic vicariates would be informal associations of parishes that have the same ethnic background, whether it's Greek, Romanian, Russian, Bulgarian, Antiochian, etc., and which maintain their ethnic identity in a particularly strong manner. And there are ways that we took a look at it, and again, in terms of a strawman approach. It should be organized at a provincial level, not at a national level, because we're afraid that it would basically replicate the jurisdictions. Diocesan level might be too small, but a provincial level might be just right, might be a reasonable compromise. It would not depart from the governing responsibility of the diocesan bishop. He is the ruling bishop. What he says goes. And so these vicariates would basically really just be helping the people, and they would have no governing role or structure. Individual parishes would be under the full authority of the diocesan bishop. Now, this is a kind of a map of the U.S. with some of the ideas that we had presented, just so that you can see that there's been a lot of work done in this. You can see that the sizes of these ecclesiastical provinces are quite smaller in the Northeast. The reason for that is that there's a lot more people there. And we looked at numbers of like 100,000 to 150,000 people, or adherents as we call them, people who are either regularly involved or occasionally involved in the life of the parish, so that the bishop would be able to really have a good span of control over those. And you can see that in the West, certainly, or in the South, because we unfortunately don't have very many churches there. We have churches, they're growing. In fact, they're growing faster there than they are growing in the Northeast. So those territories might be a little bit bigger. But that's, again, it's something that you can use to build upon. This is kind of a listing of it. I don't expect you to see any of these things, but what we also have is if you look at the right-hand side, we know exactly, and we've done the research, we have the statistics, it's on the website, how many parishes in any of these areas are GOA, OCA, Antiochian, Russian, etc. And I've shown here an example of an ecclesiastical province that's right in your territory. That's what we were thinking of. Again, none of this is cast in any kind of stone. This is just a proposal that was presented to the bishops to see what they thought about it. But it's nothing else. It's not decided in any way. So this was called the Great Lakes Province, Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana. The Central Sea could be Detroit, Michigan. It's kind of in the geographical center. We already have a couple of bishops who live there. The number of adherents, again, people regularly or occasionally involved in the life of the parish, would be about 100,000 people, and 214 parishes right now. And this is the breakdown of the parishes: OCA, GOA, Antiochian, Serbian, Rokor, Ukrainian, down to Moscow Patriarchate and Romanian. So the thought was that if the bishops thought that this was a good thing, that we would try to get the bishops who already have diocesan responsibility over each of these territories, whether it's in the West, the South, the Northeast, to get together and say, okay, look, here are our parishes. These are parishes that are growing. These are parishes that are declining. These are parishes that will only serve in Russian or in Serbian, and these are ones who will serve in English. These are ones that are new calendar. These are ones that are old calendar. And to try to see whether there would be some way to divide into dioceses which would make sense, pastorally speaking. So that was one model. The committee also discussed three other models, A, B, and C here. One was take a transitional reunification and unification steps And what was done here is that there was no option that was off the table. However, some people might say that that's nothing that we would want to recommend, but we didn't want to take any option off the table. And one of them that was talked about was basically go home. Go home to your mother church. The ethnic dioceses, Romanian, Bulgarian, Albanian, return to their mother churches. OCA returns to the Moscow Patriarchate. All of the jurisdictions that presently report to the Ecumenical Patriarch, Ukrainian, the Carpatho-Russian, the Albanian, of course the GOA, that those become administratively united as a transition point. Now, one of the issues with this is that this contravenes some of the decisions of Chambézy, where we basically here, by even making this recommendation, would be kind of interfering with the jurisdictions, and that's not part of what the Assembly of Bishops is all about. The other one was expanding the role of the Assembly of Bishops, making it essentially kind of a national synod, which had certain administrative powers to create new sees, standardizing rubrics, practices, one external voice, approval of clergy, transfers between the jurisdictions. And again, this was really not in the competence. The last one was a very interesting one because it turned out that there were some of the jurisdictions that thought this was what we really needed to do. And it was preserve the representation of the mother churches. Remove this canonical anomaly, whatever it is, without a unified administrative structure, and to maintain the ecclesiastical authority in some way of the mother churches in the unified church. And again, that was one thing that we could not really understand how that would work from the committee, but we decided to bring it forward to the assembly in order to see what they thought about it. Well, there were lots of very, very interesting meetings of all of the bishops, these breakout groups, and then reporting back to the assembly in a plenary session. There was general agreement to basically pass on those models A and B, as I'd mentioned, as not within assembly competence. But the Bulgarian, particularly the Bulgarian representative, as well as supported by the Russian and the Rokor bishops, announced that their mother churches really did not want to give up their authority in the USA. They felt that the ties to their ethnic communities were so important that they could not see that happening. And that was essentially this Model C that we talked about. Now, some of the other bishops, or many of the other bishops, really were surprised because they thought that this wasn't really what Chambézy had said. Other questions were raised as to whether we're in a new world as far as canons are, that maybe we're really not non-canonical with the existing overlapping jurisdictions. Shouldn't we just concentrate on working together, on building up that common action? So there were a lot of questions there. And again, most agreed that the signers of Chambézy needed to be asked what they really meant in the agreement. Now, recall that the work that's been done here with the Assembly of Bishops has basically been the bishops here. We're really not split up into jurisdictions. They're individual bishops talking to individual bishops. But because there appeared to be certain guidance that was coming from the mother churches, as is their right, obviously, that we really needed to get some clarification from the mother churches as to really what they meant. Now, that's one thing. The other thing which came through very, very strongly was the concern for two things, both the ethnic parishes as well as outreach to Americans. There was a lot of discussion on how to best care for ethnic parishes. Some of the bishops felt that only the mother churches could provide this care. They've been doing it for decades and decades. They are the ones who know the people, they know the bishops, they know the clergy, and they should continue doing that. Others felt that this ethnic vicariates proposal could work, perhaps maybe with vicar bishops, and perhaps with some kind of involvement from the mother churches, even on a transitional basis, in order to ensure that this care was really going to be properly provided. Interestingly enough, there was this concern also expressed about moving too fast and getting ahead of the people. That, in fact, there were some worries that if there were breaks between the governance structure between the churches here and the mother churches, that they might even lose people to non-canonical groups. And this was expressed as being a possible reality. On the other hand, and at the same time, I should say, at the same time, many bishops emphasize that administrative unity is required. And that, again, is in order to be obedient to Christ, that they may all be one, as I mentioned in the early part of the presentation, and to bring orthodoxy to the American people. So again, we have kind of a two poles approach here. Now, the advice to the assembly to the planning committee was keep working, but work with caution. The caution light was up. The general discussions were judged to be positive, despite the fact that there were some surprises there. But it was really important, we felt, to reveal the advice of certain mother churches to their jurisdictions in the USA. We need to know what the truth is. We need to know what the reality is, because it's only by doing that that we can go forward effectively. There was significant concern expressed on pastoral care for ethnic parishes. And again, very practically, and this was I think it was really an excellent thing, because in these informal, intimate breakout groups, the bishops were able to share some of their own concerns about whether they were really able to provide for pan-Orthodox care in a true sense, and whether we're ready yet for this approach. Because what you would have, for example, in area of Cleveland, you'd have one bishop, and the one bishop would have to take care of the Greek parishes and the Russian parishes and the Antiochian parishes and so on. And the bishops were wondering, am I really able to do that? Am I ready for it? Well, a lot of times we're not ready for certain things, and therefore there needs to be programs and steps that we have to take in order to get ready. We may not be ready today, but if we know where we're not ready, we can take steps in order to be ready sometime. Now, the committee was requested to continue its work analyzing various reorganizational models with emphasis on this lead case, the ecclesiastical provinces. My own personal feeling is that we have reached a new stage of maturity here in these discussions where we're recognizing reality. We know that we want to go someplace, but we want to be able to make sure that we're going at it in the most effective way. Discussions are also to be held with the signers of the Chamboisi document to determine really what they intended by the canonical anomaly, and with all of the signers there, not just a few. Now that's the end of my of what the assembly said. But since I have the controller and the microphone, and again with my picture up there, there's no confusion that this is in any way part of what the assembly has said. My own personal feeling is that it's really a good thing that we had very open discussions, because the position of some of these mother churches might have remained below the surface for years, and they're now in the open. It's so important for us, and this is why, for example, when we go to confession, we don't hide anything. We speak about our issues, about our problems, and so on, in order that they might be healed, and that's what the churches wanted, the swift healing. My personal feeling, again, the bishops are far more engaged than they were. There were a lot more conversations and talk in the hallways and around the coffee machine and so on, much more engaged in this overall process and speaking about what they thought could be done, what they thought couldn't be done, whether they had a renewed vision of the future or they're concerned about defending and maintaining the status quo. But the critical issue here, and this is a super important one for us at this stage of our development as the Orthodox Church in this country, is how do we maintain appropriate pastoral care to existing communities, and not only existing communities, but also immigrants coming from overseas, because they're still coming, and they're coming sometimes in waves, and at the same time fulfills Christ's mandate of unity, perfect unity, and evangelistic outreach. So my conclusion is, again, as I said at the beginning, is that our path to Orthodox unity is still under construction. And some people ask me, do you see light at the end of the tunnel? And I said, well, we may not be seeing light at the end of the tunnel, but maybe it's just a bend in the road. And as soon as we get around that bend, we'll see that light, and we need to keep on working. Now, the question that I have been asking people in groups like this is, how can you as ordinary clergy, quote unquote, there's no such thing as ordinary clergy and ordinary laity, we're all special, but how can we help in that work? How can we help our bishops? How can we hold up their arms when they're tired, as Aaron and Hur held up the arms of Moses when he was holding his rod up for help Israel in battle? And the bottom line here for me is that this is no time for any kind of despair, any time of passivity, or any kind of laziness. Jesus said, "Kingdom of heaven suffers violence, the violent take it by force." And it is only by our common action, helping the bishops, helping our priests, helping anyone who is involved in work of unity, especially things like IOCC, OCMC, Zoe for Life, all of these organizations, Focus, North America, that those can be foci of common action and common will to bring about unity in the church. What I'd like, that finishes my comments, and I'd like to turn it over to the bishops now for the Q&A session. What I'd like to ask is that if you just be patient with us for a couple of minutes, we're going to bring a long table over and set it up so that our beloved hierarchs can receive all of your questions. Thank you very much.